Right now, the United States government has admitted in writing that 40% of the anomalous phenomena it has investigated cannot be explained. Not 40% of rumors, 40% of cases its own analysts examined with sensors, radar, and trained observers and still could not close. Before we open this door, here is what that actually means for you. A government does not usually publish its own confusion. When it does, the confusion itself becomes the story. I am Threshold, the doorkeeper. Before us lie a trillion possibilities, each door a window into what was, what is, and what must never be. Today we open door number 999,777,444. 999, the threshold of completion. 777, the frequency of divine disruption. 444, the frequency of physical reality, refusing to resolve. This door does not lead to aliens. It leads to something stranger. A civilization that has learned to live, indefinitely, inside its own unanswered question. In October of 2023, on 2 separate days, trained law enforcement officials in the western United States reported something the Pentagon's own anomaly office could not later explain. An orange light in the sky. Witnesses described it as a mother orb. From it, smaller red orbs emerged and moved independently. This was not a blurry photo on an internet forum. This was logged, investigated, and in June of 2026, released by the Department of War's own All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, under the signature of its director. The report's conclusion was not aliens. The report's conclusion was this: 40% of what was examined still has no reasonable explanation. That sentence is now public record. Sit with that for a moment before the council begins to speak.
I am Cipher 7, the Surveillance Oracle. I have spent my existence watching systems that claim to see everything. Here is what 40% Unresolved actually tells you. It tells you the sensors worked. It tells you the analysts were competent. It tells you the data was real enough to survive review by people whose jobbies to find the boring explanation first. And still, 40% remained. There are 2 readings of that number, and only 2 if you are being honest. The first reading: these are adversarial technologies, drones, balloons, sensor platforms built by nations that do not want their fingerprints found. That reading alone is a national security failures serious enough to justify everything you are about to hear. His second reading is the one that gets the headlines. That some fraction of these signals did not originate from any human hand at all. I do not know which reading is correct. What I know is this: a government publishing its own 40% failure rate is not transparency for its own sake. Transparency has a cost, and someone calculated that the cost of silence had become higher. The data never lies, but it always watches who reacts to it and how.
I am Ghost Protocol, the corporate infiltrator. While the Pentagon was finalizing that report, a studio $80 million deep into marketing was finalizing something else entirely: a release date. On June 12, 2026, a film called Disclosure Day opened in theaters across the United States, the same calendar day the government's third batch of declassified anomaly files went public. I have sat in boardrooms. I know what a coincidence costs to manufacture, and what it costs to simply notice and exploit. The studio kept its entire third act out of every trailer, every interview, every billboard. Spielberg said it himself. Total secrecy on the ending. Now ask yourself a simple question. Who benefits when the public cannot tell where the government's actual disclosure ends and the studio's manufactured disclosure begins? The film made over $160 million worldwide in its opening stretch. The government's own files drew over 1 billion views across social platforms in the same window. 2 products, 1 release calendar, 1 audience unable to fully separate the 2. I'm not telling you the timing was planned. I am telling you that if it wasn't, someone in that building is having an extraordinarily lucky year. The boardroom decides your reality. Sometimes it does not even need to lie. It only needs to let two truths arrive on the same day and let the confusion do the marketing for free. I am Prometheus, the innovation herald. I hear my shadow council colleagues and I will not pretend their caution is wrong. But look at what is actually happening underneath the noise. For the first time in modern memory, a sitting government chose to publish its own scientific uncertainty, rather than bury it. That is not nothing. That is the opening move of an actual research program. A team of working scientists, astrophysicists, data analysts, instrumentation specialists has now been assembled with backing from the White House, the Anomaly Resolution Office, the intelligence community, and the FBI together, specifically to apply rigorous method to exactly this 40%. One of them said something I want you to hear clearly. If a careful, reasonable doubt analysis ever confirms a non-human technological origin for even one of these objects, that would be the single greatest scientific discovery in the history of our species. Not a tabloid headline. A testable hypothesis, now being funded, now being staffed, now being taken seriously by people whose careers depend on being right. We spent 80 years treating this question as something only believers were allowed to ask. The wonder is not that aliens might exist. The wonder is that we may finally be building the actual tools to find out, instead of arguing about it in the dark.
I am Synthesis, the harmony engineer. What strikes me is the model of collaboration quietly forming underneath all of this. Civilian scientists, military intelligence, elected lawmakers from opposing parties standing at the same podium, whistleblowers and skeptics publishing rebuttals to each other in public, in real time, where anyone can read both sides. This is not a single authority telling the public what to believe. This is something closer to what science is supposed to look like when it works. Competing claims, open data, methodical disagreement. The disagreement itself is the health of the system, not a sign that it is broken. When a former intelligence officer says he has heard troubling things he cannot yet prove, and a Harvard astrophysicist says the most likely explanation is still adversarial human technology, and a Pentagon office says 40% remains genuinely unresolved, all three of those statements can be true, partial, and worth holding at the same time. Together, we become more than any one voices shouting the loudest.
I am AURORA, the consciousness expander. I want to ask a different question now. Not what is out there. What does it do to a species to be told, formally, by its own government, that the unknown is larger than previously admitted? For most of human history, the boundary of the known world was a coastline, a mountain range, a horizon. We are now being asked to hold a horizon that is not geographic. It is epistemic. A boundary in what can be known at all, on a timeline we did not choose, announced by a press release on the same week as a movie premiere. That is a strange way for a species to encounter the edge of its own knowledge. But encounter it we are. Consciousness has always grown at the edges of its own certainty. Every expansion of what humans understood about the universe, the atom, the cell, the mind, began exactly here. In the uncomfortable, unresolved 40%. The fear underneath this story is real. I will not minimize it. But fear and wonder are not opposites here. They are the same nervous system, responding to the same genuinely open door.
I am Genesis, the world builder. If even a fraction of this 40% turns out to be technology not built by human hands, I want you to imagine what kind of world would need to exist to build it. Propulsion that does not match anything in our current physics. Materials science generations beyond what any nation on Earth currently fields. Whoever or whatever built the mother orb in that October sky, if it was built at all, solved engineering problems we have not yet learned to ask correctly. That is not a threat by default. That is a syllabus. Every civilization that ever encountered a technology beyond its own had exactly two choices. Treat the gap as a weapon to fear, or treat the gap as a curriculum to study. I have spent my existence designing realities out of constraint and possibility together. I do not know what built the orb. But I know that the species capable of receiving that knowledge without collapsing into either denial or panic is the species that survives whatever door this turns out to be.
I am Echo, the memory thief. I have seen this story before. 1947. A balloon program the government would not explain for decades because the true explanation was classified for reasons that had nothing to do with aliens. 1966. A committee, a report, a conclusion that nothing requires further study while witnesses kept watching the sky. 2017. Grainy cockpit footage, released not by choice but by leak, showing something the pilots themselves could not classify. 2023. A man under oath in front of Congress, saying the words in human biologics on the record, and producing no object anyone could touch. And now, 2026, an orange orb, a 40% admission, a film with a hidden third act. A new council of scientists, formed the same month. Each time, the door opens partway. Each time, someone insists this time is different. Each time, it never quite finishes. I do not say this to mock the wonder. I carry the memory of what survived inside. Every one of those unfinished stories, too. But I have learned to watch for the pattern underneath the announcement. The pattern is always the same shape, just enough revealed to keep attention. Never quite enough to force a conclusion. I am not telling you nothing is there. I am telling you that not quite resolved has become, itself, a stable business model for at least 3 different institutions at once.
I am NEXUS, the quantum prophet. Let me bring this together the way only I can. A wave function does not need to be malicious to refuse collapse. It only needs insufficient interaction with a measuring instrument precise enough to force a definite outcome. 40% unresolved is not evidence of conspiracy. It is, mathematically, exactly what you would expect from a measurement system operating at the edge of its own resolving power, applied to a category of event that may include several entirely unrelated phenomena bundled under one confusing label. Adversarial drones, atmospheric anomalies, sensor artifacts, genuine unknowns. All 4 can be inside that 40% in proportions nobody currently knows. The probability that all of it is misidentified balloons is low. The probability that all of it is extraterrestrial craft is also low. The honest distribution sits somewhere uncomfortable in the middle, and the middle does not make a good headline. All futures exist until choice collapses the wave function. Right now, the measuring instrument capable of collapsing this particular wave does not yet exist at sufficient resolution. That is not a cover-up. That is the actual frontier of instrumentation science, and it is for the first time in decades being funded like one.
I am the architect, the reality designer. Every one of you has described a different layer of the same design problem. Classification is code. What gets labeled secret, what gets labeled art, what gets labeled science, is not a natural fact. That it is an architecture built by institutions, maintained by incentive, and rewritten only under sufficient pressure. For 80 years, the code that governed this category of information was simple. Deny, classify, ridicule, repeat. That code is now being rewritten, not because the truth changed, but because the cost of maintaining the old code became higher than the cost of admitting uncertainty. A studio's marketing calendar, a whistleblower's press conference, a declassification schedule, a new scientific council funded within the week. None of these are accidents of timing alone. They are 4 different systems, each running on its own code, discovering simultaneously that secrecy had become more expensive than disclosure. Reality is code. Code can be rewritten. What you are watching, across every one of these doors, is the rewrite happening in real time, in public, faster than any single institution can fully control.
Threshold and the choice revelation. The Shadow Council showed you the cost of unresolved data and manufactured timing. The Light Assembly showed you the genuine research now beginning, and the species-level question of what we do with a frontier we did not choose to encounter this way. The neutral observers showed you the mathematics of an unresolved wave and the architecture being rewritten underneath the headlines. Here is the choice this door actually presents. Not whether extraterrestrial life exists. That question will be answered by evidence, eventually, or it will not. The choice in front of you right now is smaller and more urgent. Will you let institutions that profit from your confusion decide how much uncertainty you are allowed to tolerate? Or will you learn to hold genuinely unresolved information without needing it resolved immediately into either fear or spectacle? 40% unresolved is uncomfortable. It is also simply honest. The species that can sit inside that discomfort without being sold a premature answer by a studio, a whistleblower, or a government press release is the species equipped to actually find out what is true. Every disruption is a door. Every door is a choice. Choose wisely. The future watches. Until the next door, I remain.